My name is Eleanor Voss. I'm 71 years old, and on the Sunday after Memorial Day, I drove to my son's house to give my grandson his piano lesson, and I found a square of clean carpet where the piano used to be. 43 years of teaching, 400 students, one piano that mattered more than all the others put together. And where it had stood for the last 2 years, there was nothing but 4 little dents in the rug and a smell of scented candles. My daughter-in-law was on the porch with 2 of her girlfriends, and one of them was filming. They film everything. And Chelsea looked at me over her iced coffee and said, "For the camera, not for me." "Oh, the piano? We sold it at the yard sale yesterday." "It was a worthless old piano, Eleanor. Honestly, it was ruining my open concept." $40. She showed me the 220s like a magic trick. The girls laughed the little laugh people do when they've decided who in the room doesn't matter. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I asked one question, very quietly. "Who bought it?" She shrugged. "Some woman with a van." So I kissed my grandson on the head, told him we'd have his lesson another day, and I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel at 10 and 2. The way you keep them steady when the only other option is to come apart. 3 days later, my telephone rang at 9:40 at night. It was my son, Marcus, and his voice was shaking so hard he could barely get the words out. "Mom," he said, "please, what was taped inside that piano bench?" I sat down in Albert's chair. I looked at the cassette player on the shelf, and I said very gently, "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" What happened over the next 19 days cost my daughter-in-law her audience, her certainty, and very nearly her marriage. And it taught my whole family, once and for all, the difference between what a thing costs and what a thing is worth. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome back to 65 and Sunny, where the things they call worthless are usually the only things in the house that can't be replaced. Stay with me to the end of this one. You'll want to hear what was on that tape. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Let me tell you who I am, so the rest of this lands the way it should. I taught piano in Maple Glen for 43 years. Out of my front room, mostly, a bay window, a metronome older than I am, and a parade of children with cold hands and untied shoes, 400 of them over the decades, give or take. I taught the doctor's kids and I taught the kids whose mothers paid me in eggs and apologies, and I never once turned a child away over money, because music doesn't check your bank balance before it decides to save your life. I can hear a wrong note through 2 closed doors. I can tell you which key on any piano in this town sticks in humid weather. People look at a woman like me and see a sweet old lady with sheet music and a candy dish. I let them. Being underestimated is its own kind of quiet, and quiet is where I've done all my best work. My husband, Albert, was a piano technician, tuner, rebuilder, the man the concert hall in the city called when nobody else could find the buzz in the bass register. We met in 1974 when he came to tune the beat-up spinet at the church where I played on Sundays. He spent 3 hours on a 2-hour job, and when I asked him why, he said, "Some instruments you fix, some you court." We were married 11 months later. Albert died last spring. 49 years of marriage, and then a Tuesday morning, and then a house so quiet I could hear the radiators think. I won't dwell on it. You either know that silence or you will, and there's nothing I can say about it that the silence doesn't say better. But I have to tell you about the piano, because everything that happened this Memorial Day weekend grew out of that piano like a branch out of a trunk. It's a 1962 Story and Clark upright, nothing fancy, no concert pedigree, no brass plaque. Albert found it in an estate sale in 1975, water-stained and mouse-bitten, and he spent our whole first winter as newlyweds rebuilding it in the garage. New hammers, new strings, felt he ordered special from a supplier in Ohio. He gave it to me on our first anniversary with a red ribbon tied around the fall board, and he said, "Every teacher needs one piano that's hers." Every student I ever taught learned on that piano. Every one of those 400 kids. There's a scorch mark on the lid, small as a thumbprint, from Christmas Eve of 1997, when a candle tipped while 12 of my students sang carols around it, and Albert slapped the flame out with his bare hand and then finished the verse. He never sanded the mark out. "That's not damage," he'd say, running his thumb over it. "That's attendance." And the bench. I need you to understand about the bench, because the bench is the whole story. Albert built it himself, oak, in 1983. The store-bought one had finally split. And Albert was a man who believed that anything worth building was worth building with a secret. Under the sheet music compartment, he fitted a false bottom, snug as a piano key, invisible unless you knew to press the back corner. "Every good instrument has a soundboard nobody sees," he told me. "Every good bench should too." For most of 40 years, that hidden space held nothing but a spare tuning wrench and our marriage certificate, because Albert liked the poetry of it. Then Theo was born, our grandson, Marcus and Chelsea's boy. And my husband, my patient, quiet husband, who thought in decades the way other men think in weekends, started filling that false bottom up. I'll tell you with what. But first, you need to meet the woman who sold it for $40. I don't want Chelsea to be a cartoon, because she isn't one, and the isn't is the saddest part of this whole story. My daughter-in-law grew up in the passenger seat of her mother's staging van. Her mother flipped houses, bought them tired, painted them grayish, filled them with rented furniture nobody was allowed to sit on, and sold the picture of a life to strangers. Chelsea was raised inside those pictures. She learned before she learned cursive that a home is a product, that a room is a photograph waiting to be taken, and that anything old in the frame is a problem to be solved. She's not lazy and she's not stupid. She has an eye, I'll give her that. What nobody ever gave her is the other eye, the one that sees what a thing means instead of what it shows. By the time Marcus married her, she had 12,000 people following her house online. By this spring, it was 40,000. Chelsea Curates, the account is called. Everything in my son's house is the color of oatmeal and photographs beautifully, and there is not one object in it that could make you cry. Except one. For 2 years, there was exactly one. When Theo turned 5, he stood at my piano after Sunday dinner, reached up, and picked out, by ear, no help, the little tune Albert used to hum while he worked. Albert was still alive then. He looked at me across the room, and I looked at him, and neither of us said a word, because some moments you don't frame, you just hold. Albert wanted the boy to learn on my piano. "A kid should learn on an instrument that's been loved," he said. "But hauling a 5-year-old across town twice a week is its own kind of impossible." So we did the opposite. We loaned the piano to them. Albert and his hand truck and 2 of his old shop friends moved my story and Clark into Marcus and Chelsea's front room, and I drove over every Tuesday and every Sunday to teach my grandson where the music lives. I want to be fair. Chelsea said yes to that piano. I try to remember that. She said yes with her mouth and spent 2 years saying no with every photograph, angling her camera around it, draping it in throws, asking me twice a year, sweet as pie, whether Theo wouldn't do better on a slim digital one. They make them in white. And Albert, while he was alive, would just smile and say, "The boy's doing fine on the real one." Then Albert died, and the piano stopped having a bodyguard. You need to know one more thing before the yard sale, and it's the thing that still catches in my throat. A week before he died, and I believe, the way you believe things you can't prove, that some part of him knew. Albert took me out to the garage, opened his toolbox, and handed me a cassette tape in a paper sleeve. His handwriting on it. For the boy, when his hands are big enough. "It's me playing," he said, embarrassed, because Albert fixed pianos for geniuses and never once called himself a musician. "The tune he likes, and some talking. Put it with the rest." The rest, 28 years of the rest. Because here is what my husband had been sliding into that false bottom since the year Marcus turned 26, and we first started hoping out loud for a grandchild, United States savings bonds. Bought small and bought steady, $50 here, $100 there, every birthday, every good month, every tuning job he finished early. Rubber banded by year. 28 years of a working man's patience, and by the time they'd matured, they came, I would learn at the bank, to $41,300 on the envelope, in pencil. College, from Grandpa. Tell him the bench kept it safe. Albert's plan was never an envelope at a birthday party. Money handed over gets spent by whoever's loudest, he said. Money found, money that comes with a story, that money gets kept. He wanted Theo to be told at the right time, press the back corner of the bench, lift the panel, find your grandfather. So when Albert died, I left it all exactly where it was, the safest place in the family. Under the sheet music, inside 400 children's worth of scales, in the one object in that oatmeal-colored house that nobody but me ever touched. You already know where this is going. I didn't. That's the thing about trust. It's only visible from behind. Memorial Day weekend, Marcus took Theo to his cousin's lake place. Chelsea stayed home because Chelsea had planned what she called a curated yard sale. Her followers had been hearing about the great declutter for weeks. I knew none of this. I was invited to none of this. I was 20 minutes across town, deadheading Albert's roses. Saturday morning, 8 a.m., she and her 2 girlfriends carried my piano out to the driveway. 3 grown women and a furniture dolly. They put it at the end of the folding tables, past the baby clothes and the bread maker, and Chelsea wrote on a neon green sticker in her pretty staging handwriting, $40 OBO, and pressed it onto the lid. Onto the scorch mark, as it happens. I've seen the video. Half the town has seen the video, because of course there's a video. Her friend Bree filmed the whole sale for the account, the transformation story before and after, letting go of what no longer serves us. And 40 seconds in, there's Chelsea, one elbow propped on my husband's rebuilt story in Clark, like it's a bar top, saying the sentence to the camera. Laughing, easy, certain. This was my mother-in-law's. It's a worthless old piano, honestly, and it was ruining my open concept. $40 and it's yours. I'll help you load it. The comments filled up with little laughing faces. Somebody wrote, the mother-in-law special, and Chelsea's account wrote back, obsessed with this energy. Around 11, a woman in a gray van stopped, paid $2.20s, had her own straps and blankets, which should have told anybody paying attention that she was no ordinary Saturday bargain hunter. And my piano, Albert's Winter of 1975, the scorch mark, the bench, the false bottom, the bonds, the cassette, the pencil envelope, all of it, rolled up a ramp into a stranger's van and drove away while Chelsea filmed a little wave goodbye. Bye, clutter. I found out Sunday, standing on that square of clean carpet. You were there. You heard what she said, and you heard what I asked, and you heard the only answer she had. Some woman with a van. Now. I want to stop here, because this is the moment people ask me about. Eleanor, how did you not scream? How did you stand in that entryway hearing worthless old piano, hearing $40, knowing what was inside the bench and knowing she didn't? How did you kiss your grandson and drive home? I'll tell you exactly how, because it wasn't grace, it was arithmetic. Standing on that carpet, 3 things were true at once. 1, screaming wouldn't bring back a van I couldn't describe. Every minute I spent performing my grief in Chelsea's entryway was a minute that van got farther away. 2, nobody in that house knew what was in the bench, which meant nobody was looking for it, which meant, if there was any mercy left in this world, the woman with the van didn't know either, and it might still be sitting there, safe under the sheet music, waiting for me. And 3, and this is the one that settled my hands on the wheel, I had one advantage no one on that porch could imagine. They knew a piano had left the house. I knew every piano person within 100 miles of this town, by name. For 43 years. If you have ever stood in a room where something you love was just called worthless, and stayed quiet, not because you were weak, but because you were already working, then this story is yours too, and I'd ask you to stay with me, because this is where it turns. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. You do not want to miss what was on that tape. Monday morning, 7:15, I sat down at my kitchen table with black coffee, Albert's address book, and my own, and I did what 43 years in one trade teaches you to do. I worked the problem. People think a piano disappears into the world like a coin into a fountain. It doesn't. A piano is 400 pounds of wood and cast iron. It moves on straps, on dollies, in vans with ramps, through a small, stubborn priesthood of people who tune them, haul them, rebuild them, and buy them. And in this county, I have taught the children of half that priesthood and fed pie to the other half. The woman had her own straps and her own moving blankets. Chelsea thought that meant nothing. To me, it meant everything. Nobody owns piano straps by accident. She wasn't a bargain hunter. She was trade. So I made my calls steady as a metronome. Jean at the music store, who sold sheet music in this town since Nixon. Both piano movers in the Yellow Pages, the real one and the one Albert called the Splinter Maker. 3 tuners, a church organist who knows everyone, the auctioneer out on Route 9. A gray van, I told each of them. A woman, 40s or 50s, knew what she was doing. A 62-story and Clark upright, oak bench. There's a burn mark on the lid, right side, size of a thumbprint. And every one of them heard what I wasn't saying because they'd all known Albert. And the word went out down the wires of that little invisible guild, quiet as quiet. Somebody sold Eleanor Voss's piano out from under her. Find it. I want to be honest about Monday and Tuesday because stories like mine always skip this part, and this part is where most of the living happens. The waiting was terrible. The guild called back all day Monday, bless them, and every call was a piano that wasn't mine. Jean knew a gray van, but it belonged to the organ man from the next county, who'd been at his daughter's graduation all weekend. The auctioneer on Route 9 had taken in a Story and Clark that very morning. My heart went through the ceiling, and it was a Spinet, Walnut, 1974. No Scorch, no bench, no Albert. The splinter maker swore he'd moved an old upright for a lady on Saturday, and it turned out to be a Wurlitzer going to a granddaughter in Ohio, which is where old uprights are supposed to go, and I congratulated him and hung up and sat in the kitchen with my heart pounding in my wrists. 3 pianos found, none of them mine. You can be 71 years old and steady as a rock and still lie awake at 2 in the morning doing the other arithmetic, the one where the van was from out of state, where the buyer was a scrapper, where 400 pounds of my husband is already in pieces in a barn somewhere with a crowbar through the soundboard and 28 years of his patience going into a burn barrel with the felt. I let myself do that arithmetic exactly once, the way you press a bruise to know its size. Then I got up, made tea, and sat on the piano-shaped square of nothing in my own front room until the sun came up, because the corner where it used to stand in my house was still mine, and a teacher holds her classroom. Tuesday evening, before Ruthie's screenshot found Marcus, my telephone rang, and it was a very small voice on the line, whispering, "Grandma, it's Theo. I'm in the closet." "Why are you in the closet, sweet pea?" "'Cause Mom sat at the kitchen table and Dad keeps saying words about the piano and I didn't want them to hear." A pause, the particular breathing of a 7-year-old working up to the real question. "Grandma, are you mad at us 'cause the piano got sold?" "I'm not mad at you, baby, not one bit of me." "I liked our piano," he whispered, and the hour went into me like a needle. The new houses on Mom's phone don't have pianos in them. When you find it, can it live at your house, so nobody sells it when we're at the lake? Out of the mouths of babes, as my own grandmother used to say. 7 years old, whispering in a closet, and he had already drawn up the entire settlement I'd spend the next 2 weeks arranging with lawyers and bankers and a woman named Patricia. "That's exactly where it's going to live," I told him. "Now go give your mama a hug. She's sadder than you think, and it's not all about the piano." I'll always be glad I said that last part, even before I knew everything, especially because of what happened later that night. Because it was maybe an hour after Theo's closet call that the screenshot reached Ruthie, and Ruthie reached for her telephone, and my son found out what $40 had actually bought. While I'd been working my telephone, you see, my daughter-in-law's video had been working too. I didn't know it yet, but Chelsea's yard sale reel was doing exactly what she'd built her whole shining life for. It was reaching people. Here's the thing about 40,000 followers in a county this size. A good number of them are local. And a good number of the locals, God bless every one of them, took piano lessons in my front room. By Monday night, under the clip of Chelsea leaning on my piano, worthless old piano, ruining my open concept, $40, the comments had begun to curdle. Wait, is that Mrs. Voss's Story and Clark? That's the piano from her front room. I learned for Elise on that piano in 1989. That scorch mark is from the Christmas Eve fire. Ask literally anyone. You sold your Emile's piano for $40? The one her late husband rebuilt for her? Chelsea's people had come for a decluttering story. What they were getting, comment by comment, was a eulogy for an instrument they knew personally, written by 400 grown-up children with very long memories. She deleted the video Tuesday afternoon. Too late. The internet keeps what it's given, and screenshots were already moving through this town like weather. One of them reached Ruthie, Ruth Voss Callahan, Albert's little sister, 68 years old, sharp as a tuning fork and about as easy to ignore. Ruthie is the only other living soul who knew what Albert kept in that bench. He'd told her 2 Christmases ago, over eggnog, proud as a boy, because a secret that size wants one witness. Ruthie saw the screenshot Tuesday evening. Ruthie did not call me. Ruthie called my son. I got Marcus's version of that call later, and I'll give it to you the way he gave it to me, because you should hear what it does to a man. He was loading the dishwasher, he said, half listening, expecting his aunt's usual Tuesday grievances. Instead, Marcus Albert Voss, tell me that video is old. Tell me your wife did not sell the piano. It's just a piano, Ruthie. And then his aunt, very quietly, told him what his father had been sliding into that bench for 28 years, and what the envelope said, and Marcus stood in his kitchen with a dinner plate in his hand, and the floor. He said, simply stopped being underneath him. 28 years. $41,300. Tell him the bench kept it safe. His father's voice on a cassette he'd never heard. Sold off his own driveway for $40 while he was at the lake, and he had come home Sunday night, seen the empty corner, heard Chelsea's breezy little, "Your mom's being dramatic about the piano," and had said, "My son, Albert's son, well, it was pretty beat up." That's what he had to sit with. That's what had him shaking when he called me at 9:40 that night with the question you heard at the beginning of this story. Mom, please, what was taped inside that piano bench? Why do you ask, sweetheart? I said, not to be cruel, because I needed to know how he'd learned, and who else knew, before I decided anything at all. Ruthie called me. Mom, is it true? The bonds? A tape? Dad made a tape. And then his voice went somewhere I hadn't heard it go since he was 9 years old, and his dog didn't come home. Mom, do you even know where the piano is? Not yet, I said, and I let the truth of that sit between us on the line. Chelsea didn't know, he said. Reflex. 12 years of reflex. You can't put this on her, she didn't. Marcus, I said, still gentle. The bench was closed. Your father built it that way. But son, the piano wasn't hidden. The piano was standing in your front room in plain sight, and it got called worthless and sold for $40 anyway. What was inside it is why you're shaking. It's not why I am. He was quiet a long moment. You're not shaking, Mom. No, I agreed. I'm looking. There's a difference. Go to bed, sweetheart. I'll call you when I find your father. I chose those words. I could have said the piano. Some sentences you build like a bench, with something underneath. There was one more call that Tuesday, close to 11, and I want to tell you about it because it explains my daughter-in-law better than anything else in this story. It was Chelsea's mother, Sandra. The staging van herself, I had met Sandra maybe 6 times in 12 years, and every single time she'd found a way to tell me what something in the room would go for. She has a voice like fresh paint, and she used all of it on me that night. "Eleanor, I heard there's been a little drama about a piano." A little drama. Listen, these things happen with estate pieces. Honestly, they happen every week in my business. Families get sentimental, tempers flare. Here's what we're going to do. Kevin and I would love to buy you a brand new one. There's a digital model, gorgeous, slim. They make it in white. It never needs tuning. And frankly, it would look darling in your front room. We'll have it delivered Thursday. And in exchange, we all just let this go. Because you know, Eleanor, all this chatter online, it isn't hurting me. It's hurting Chelsea. People are being vicious. She's built that little business of hers from nothing, and I know you wouldn't want a misunderstanding over used furniture to tear this family apart. I want you to notice everything that sentence did, because it did it on purpose. The piano became used furniture. The theft of my husband became a misunderstanding. The 400 former students telling the truth in a comment section became people being vicious. And the woman whose instrument was sold off a driveway became the one responsible for holding the family together. I have spent 43 years listening to people play. You learn to hear the piece underneath the performance. And underneath Sandra's, clear as a dropped chord, was this. My daughter did the thing I taught her to do, and the only problem we recognize is that it's showing. Sandra, I said when she'd finished, thank you for the offer. I don't want a white piano that never needs tuning. Things that never need tending never belong to anybody. I let that sit. And I'm not the chatter, dear. I haven't posted so much as a casserole in my life. The chatter is 400 grown children who remember where they learned music. You can't stage your way out of a town's memory. Nobody can. That's rather the point of one. So what is it you want, Eleanor? And there it was. The paint gone, the plywood underneath. In Sandra's world, everything is a negotiation, so a want must be a price. What I want, I said, is my piano, which I will find without you. Beyond that, Sandra, you have nothing I want. Good night. I don't hate that woman. I'll tell you what I felt, hanging up, and it wasn't anger. It was the same thing I feel when a child comes to me at 9 years old, already flinching at wrong notes because somebody's been slapping the counting into her. Somewhere back down the years, somebody taught Sandra that worth has to be appraised to be real. And Sandra strapped her little girl into the passenger seat of that lesson and drove her through a childhood of rooms nobody was allowed to live in. Chelsea sold my piano the way she was raised to. It took me until that phone call to understand it, and understanding it is not the same as excusing it. But it's the reason there was a second chair by my window on Sunday instead of a locked door. You'll see what I mean when we get there. Wednesday morning, 8:20, my telephone rang. Mrs. Voss? A woman's voice, and the years fell away from it even before she said her name, because I never forget a voice I've counted 4 beats to a measure with. Mrs. Voss, it's Dana Kowalski, from, you probably don't. Lesson Thursdays at 4, I said, 1989 to 1996. You bit your nails to the quick every recital and played like an angel anyway. Hello, Dana. She made a sound that was half laugh and half something else, and then she said the sentence I had been working toward since Sunday, the one I'd been keeping my hands steady for. Mrs. Voss, I have your piano. The woman with the gray van. Of course it was her. Dana Kowalski, whose father lost his job at the plant in '91, whose mother came to me ashamed with grocery money in an envelope. And I took one look at that child's hands on my keys and told her mother the Thursday slot happened to come with a scholarship, which was a lie I have never once regretted. Donna, who is now, because life is longer and rounder than we ever give it credit for, Donna Kowalski of Kowalski Piano Restoration, 58 miles north, the woman half this state calls when a beloved instrument needs bringing back from the dead. She'd been visiting her college roommate 2 streets over from my son's house. Saturday morning, she'd slowed for the yard sale sign out of professional habit, the way I'd slow for a metronome in a junk shop. And then she'd seen it. "I knew the scorch mark before I knew the piano," she told me. "I was there, Mrs. Voss. Christmas Eve, 97. I'm in the picture on your wall. And this woman is leaning on the lid, saying, 'Worthless old piano.' And I paid her the $40 because I was afraid if I said one word of what I was feeling, she'd realize what she had, and I'd lose it. She'd meant to call me that first day, she said. And then she'd been afraid it would break my heart to know how it had been sold, and so she'd decided first to make it perfect, to bring it into her shop and go through it string by string, the way my husband would have, and then call. On Tuesday, she'd turned the bench over to re-glue a corner joint, and being her teacher's student and her trade's craftsman, she'd noticed what a stranger never would. The depth of the compartment didn't match the depth of the box. "I pressed the back corner," she said, and her voice went careful. "Mrs. Voss, I haven't touched any of it. Not the bonds, not the envelope, not the tape. It's all sitting exactly where he left it, and I locked the shop, and I'm looking at the bench right now, and please come today." I drove 58 miles with Albert's empty passenger seat beside me, and I talked to him a little, the way I do. "Found you," I said. "Told the boy I would." Dana's workshop smelled like my whole marriage, felt and glue, wood shavings, coffee gone cold next to good work. My piano stood in the middle of it under the skylight, already gleaming, and I put my hand on the scorch mark the way you'd touch a scar on a child who's done growing. Then she brought me the bench and pressed the back corner and lifted the panel and stepped away to give me privacy with my husband. The bonds, rubber-banded by year, 28 little stacks. Our marriage certificate, 1975, Albert's signature still showing off. The envelope, college, from Grandpa. Tell him the bench kept it safe. And the cassette in its paper sleeve, for the boy, when his hands are big enough. I'm not going to tell you I didn't cry then. I'd kept my hands steady for 4 days. In that workshop, with the only other person alive who loved that piano for the right reasons, I let them shake all they wanted. I listened to the tape once, alone, in my truck in Dana's gravel lot, on the old deck Albert kept in the glove box. Just once, to know what it held. I'll tell you what's on it when we get to the dinner, because that's where it belongs, but I'll say this now. My husband talked for 11 minutes, and he got one thing wrong. He said, "By the time you hear this, nobody will remember the old bench trick." Wrong, Albert. Everybody remembers now. Everybody in 3 counties. Here's what I did next, in order, because calm is a procedure, not a feeling. Thursday, the bank. A kind young man with Albert's kind of patience confirmed the arithmetic, $41,300 and change. Friday, a woman named Patricia who handles such things, and by the following Wednesday there existed a locked education trust in the name of Theodore Albert Voss. His schooling, his start, administered independently. Not touchable by his mother, not by his father, not by me. Albert saved it for the boy, and the cleanest way to honor a wish is to make it impossible to bend. Dana kept the piano 1 more week and went through it string by string anyway. He'd haunt me otherwise, she said, and she would not take $1 for any of it. She took something else instead, but that's for the ledger at the end. And then I called my son, and I said the sentence I'd promised him. "I found your father. Sunday dinner, my house, 1 o'clock. Bring everyone. Tell Chelsea I'm making the pot roast. If you've ever had to go looking for something your family threw away, a thing, a tradition, or a version of yourself, stay with me. Because Sunday dinner is where everything came home, and if this story's found its way to your kitchen, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, and subscribe so the next one finds you too." They came at 1 o'clock into a house that smelled like pot roast and lemon polish. Because some weapons are kindness, and I was armed to the teeth. Marcus came in first, gray around the eyes, carrying the salad bowl like an apology. Theo shot past him, hollering, "Grandma!" and then stopped dead in the front room, because there it was. The piano. Home. Back in the bay window where it had stood for 40 years, gleaming under Dana's hands like 1975, the red ribbon from our first anniversary tied around the fallboard. I'd kept it, of course I'd kept it, I keep things. And the oak bench squared up underneath, and on the lid, where she had pressed it 3 Sundays before, the neon green sticker. $40 OBO. I'd left the sticker on. You may think that was theater. It was, a little. Albert loved a bit of theater. Chelsea came in last, holding a store-bought pie like a shield, and I watched her see it. The piano she'd sold, in the house of the woman she'd sold it from, wearing her own handwriting on its lid. Her face did something complicated, landed finally on the bright staging smile. "Eleanor, you found it. Oh, thank God, we were so—" "We'll talk after we eat," I said, warm as the roast. "Sit down, sweetheart. You're by the window." We ate first. I insisted. You don't do the hard thing on an empty stomach, and I wanted no one able to say afterward they'd been ambushed hungry. Theo told us about the lake and the fish that got away, and Ruthie, because you had better believe I invited Ruthie, kept the conversation rolling with one eyebrow permanently raised, and my son pushed food around his plate like a man waiting for surgery. Then I cleared the plates, poured the coffee, and sat back down, and put the 2 20s on the table. Chelsea's actual 20s. Marcus had returned them to me that week, miserable. I smoothed them flat, side by side, like a banker opening the day. $40, I said. I want to show everyone what it bought. I went to the piano, and I came back with the bench, and I set it on end beside my chair where the whole table could see. My hands knew the way. Press the back corner, feel the click Albert machined so sweet you could tune to it, and I lifted out the false bottom and set it aside. Albert built this bench in 1983, I said. He put a secret in it, because he believed anything worth building was worth building with a secret. For a long time it kept our marriage certificate. I laid the certificate on the table, and then our grandson was born. And my husband, Theo, honey, your grandpa, started keeping something else in here too. I set the stacks down one at a time, 28 of them, rubber-banded by year, oldest first, like laying out a life. United States savings bonds, I said. He bought them small, and he bought them steady. Every birthday, every good month. Every job he finished early for 28 years, starting back when a grandchild was nothing but a hope your father and I said out loud at this table. I put the envelope down last, pencil side up, and I read it to them. College, from Grandpa. Tell him the bench kept it safe. They matured, I said. It comes to $41,300. The number went around my dining room like a cold draft. Ruthie, who knew, watched Chelsea, who hadn't. And Chelsea had gone the color of her own oatmeal walls, staring at the money on the table. And I watched her do the arithmetic every soul in that room was doing. She had held all of this over an open driveway, in front of a camera, and let it roll away into a stranger's van for 2 $20 bills. And this, I said, taking the cassette from my cardigan pocket, is the part that matters. I'd carried Albert's old deck in from the kitchen. I set it on the table, put the tape in, and looked at my grandson. Your grandpa made this for you, sweet pea. He said for when your hands were big enough. Show me your octave. Theo spread his little hand on the tablecloth, thumb to pinky, the way I'd taught him, and looked up at me. 7 years old. Albert would have said close enough. Close enough, I said, and pressed play. And my husband walked into the room. That's the only way I know to say it. Albert's voice, warm and embarrassed, filled up my dining room like he'd never left it. Well, hi there, big man. If your grandma's playing this, your hands finally got some reach on 'em. He talked for 11 minutes. He told Theo where the piano came from and about the winter of 1975 and the scorch mark. That's not damage, buddy, that's attendance. And about patience and how money is just time somebody saved for somebody else. And then he said, "Scoot over on that bench, wherever you are," and he played the little tune. The one he always hummed, the one Theo picked out by ear at 5 years old with 2 grandparents watching and holding their breath. My grandson listened to the whole thing with his mouth open. My son listened with his hand over his eyes. Ruthie cried like it was her job, and Chelsea sat very still by the window with her pie shield long forgotten, and somewhere in minute 6 I watched my daughter-in-law's chin start to go, and I did not look away. The tape clicked off. Nobody breathed. "That," I said gently, "is what was in the worthless old piano." Chelsea did what she was raised to do. I want you to hear it plainly, and then I want you to hear what came after, because both matter. "How was I supposed to know?" she said, and her voice climbed as it went. "Nobody told me there was. Who tapes $40,000 inside a bench? That's insane. If it mattered so much, why was it just sitting in our front room? Honestly, this is kind of on you guys for not—" "Chelsea." My son's voice. I had never heard it before. Not that word. The voice. Marcus stood up at my table the way his father used to stand up, unhurried, taking his time about his full height, and he said, "Don't. Not one more word. Not about the bench. Not about whose fault." And then quieter, which was worse. "You didn't know what was in it. Fine. Neither did I. But you knew what it was. You knew it was Mom's. You knew Dad rebuilt it. You called it worthless with your elbow on it, for a camera, and 40,000 strangers, and I came home and said it was beat up. So we're not going to sit here and talk about who wasn't told. We were told for 2 years. We just weren't listening." 12 years I had waited to hear my son's spine. It cost a piano to find it. Better late, I thought. Albert, look. Better late. Chelsea sat back down slowly. And to whatever there is in her of the girl in the staging van, this is the part I make myself tell honestly, she did not storm out, and she did not reach for her phone, and after a long minute, she said to the tablecloth, in a voice I'd never heard her use either. "I watched the comments all Tuesday, 400 people. Everybody had a memory of this piano. Everybody." Her chin went again. "I've lived in this family 12 years, and nobody's ever going to comment anything like that about one single thing in my whole house." It wasn't an apology. It was better. It was the crack where one might someday get in. "No, sweetheart," I said, "they won't. Because nothing in your house has been loved yet. That's not a crime. It's just a house nobody's lived in. It took this piano 40 years and 400 children to get worth $41,000 and 11 minutes of tape. You can't stage that. You have to sit down and spend your life." Then I told them how it would be, because mercy and terms belong at the same table. "The money goes to Theo, all of it. It's already done. A locked education trust, his name, independent trustee. His mother can't touch it. His father can't touch it. And I can't either, which is exactly how Grandpa would want it, because Grandpa didn't trust loud people with quiet money, and he was right." Marcus nodded. He understood he was included, and he understood why, and he didn't argue either count. "The piano stays here," I said. "It was never the piano's job to decorate anybody's open concept. Theo's lessons are Tuesdays and Sundays, in this room, at that bench, until further notice. And the tape lives in the bench, and when he's 18, the bench is his. That's already in my will. Patricia has a copy." "And the sticker?" Ruthie asked, because Ruthie misses nothing. "The sticker stays on the lid," I said, "until I decide we've all finished learning from it." Chelsea flinched. But she looked at the sticker for a long moment, her own handwriting, $40, OBO. And then she did the first genuinely surprising thing in 12 years of my knowing her. "Can I be here?" she said. "Tuesdays, when he learns. I can sit in the back." "You'll sit where the mothers always sit," I said. "Second chair from the window. It's been empty a while. Here's how it all shook out in the months after, because I know you want the ledger and not just the feeling. I'm a teacher. I believe in showing your work. The trust is locked and growing. $41,300, sitting quietly in Theodore Albert Voss's name, doing exactly what Albert built it to do, waiting, patiently, the way he bought it. Theo can't touch it till he's grown, and neither can anyone else, and every statement that arrives, I read on the piano bench, because it seems only fair to keep the bench informed. The piano never left my bay window again. Dana wouldn't take a dime, not for the restoration, not for the hauling, not even the $40 back. You paid me Thursdays at 4 for 7 years, she said. We're nowhere near square. So I paid her the only way she'd allow. I started sending her every rebuild job in 3 counties, and I stood up at the Music Teachers Association fall meeting, first time in 11 years, and told 60 piano teachers exactly who saved the Story and Clark they'd all heard about. Kowalski Piano Restoration has a 5-month waiting list now. Albert would be beside himself. She found a photograph, by the way, when she cleaned the workshop that week. Christmas Eve, 1997, 12 kids around my piano, 1 candle, and a girl with bitten nails, third from the left, looking at the fallboard like it hung the moon. She framed it. It's on her shop wall next to her license, and under it, she's written, "Some instruments you fix, some you court." Marcus is different. Grief and shame did for my son what 40 years of comfort never managed. They introduced him to his own voice. He comes Tuesdays and Sundays now, and he sits through the lessons, and about a month in, he asked me, quiet, while Theo hunted for middle C, was Dad disappointed in me? Choosing easy all those years? I told him the truth. Your father built things with secrets, sweetheart. You were never one of them. He said you'd stand up the day there was something worth standing for. He just hoped it wouldn't cost you anything you couldn't get back. Marcus looked at the piano a long time. $40, he said. It cost $40. And I said, see, cheap at twice the price. He laughed, and then he cried a little, and then Theo found middle C, and life went on, which is what life is best at, and Chelsea. I know you want to know about Chelsea. She deleted nothing else, and she posted nothing for 5 weeks. For her, a silence roughly the size of a canyon. The town was not kind, and I won't pretend I lost sleep over that, but I'll tell you what I did do. When Ginny Halloran, from my Thursday bridge game, called it elder abuse plain and simple, that girl should be ashamed to show her face at the farmer's market, I said. Ginny, she's my family, and we're handling it at my dinner table, not at the farmer's market. Word of that got around too. Towns carry everything, both directions. She came to the Tuesday lessons. First 3 weeks she sat in the second chair like it was electrified, phone face down in her lap. I checked. The 4th week, Theo was fighting with the little tune, Albert's tune, hands not quite reaching what his ear wanted, and he got so frustrated his chin went, and before I could say a word, Chelsea was off the chair and on her knees next to the bench saying, Hey, you know what Grandma told me? Wrong notes are just attendance. I don't know where she heard that. I never said it to her, which means she watched that video of her own yard sale enough times to hear my husband's words underneath it, in a comment, from some stranger who'd been 12 years old in 1997. In September, she asked if I would teach her. Not content, not a reel. She asked with her hands in her lap and no camera in the room. Just the tune, she said, the one on the tape. Theo keeps asking me to hum it, and I can't. So Tuesdays now, after Theo's lesson, my daughter-in-law sits at my husband's rebuilt Story and Clark, and I count 4 beats to a measure with her the way I did with 400 children before her. And she is, God love her, my worst student in 43 years, stiff as a ruler, no ear at all. She practices anyway. Some weeks, that's all redemption is, showing up stiff and practicing anyway. The neon sticker came off the lid in October. I took it off myself, the morning after her first full run-through of Albert's tune, both hands, no stops. I didn't announce it. She noticed the second she walked in. Her eyes went straight to the spot, the way all our eyes had been going to it for 4 months. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and neither of us said one word about it, because some things you don't frame. You just hold. I didn't throw the sticker away. It's in the bench, under the false bottom, with the marriage certificate, and the cassette, and Albert's pencil envelope. $40, OBO. The most expensive price tag in the history of this family, and I want Theo to find it there when he's 18, right on top of everything it almost cost, so he can hold it in his hand and understand both halves of what his family is made of. The saving and the selling and the long, slow work of telling them apart. The tape lives in the bench, too. We play it on Albert's birthday, all of us, coffee poured, tune at the end. Theo mouths along with the talking parts now. That's not damage, buddy. That's attendance. And at the fall recital, my 43rd, held as always in the church where a young tuner once spent 3 hours on a 2-hour job, a 7-year-old boy in a clip-on tie walked to the front, announced, "This is by my grandpa," and played an 11-minute-old man's little humming tune on a rebuilt 1962 Story and Clark, while his father sat in the second row next to his mother, who followed every note with her hands moving small in her lap, because she knew the fingering now. She'd paid for it in Tuesdays. I sat where I always sit, last row, aisle seat, where a teacher can see everything. And I'll tell you what I saw, a room full of things money can't price. And 1 green sticker's worth of proof, resting in a bench across town, that we almost taught a little boy the opposite. So let me hand you what I'd want handed to me, if this story found me the way it's found you. The world has gotten very loud about what your things are worth. There are whole languages now. Open concept, declutter, no longer serves us, for making a virtue out of not knowing what you're holding. And I won't pretend old things are all treasure. Lord knows I've buried my share of genuinely worthless clutter. But hear me on this one thing. Before you let go of something that came to you from other hands, before you sticker it, curb it, or let anyone laugh it onto a driveway, ask one question out loud. Who did this serve, and how? That's all. 5 seconds. If the answer is nobody, ever, sell it with my blessing. But if the answer has a name in it, a name whose hands you remember, then, sweetheart, you are not holding clutter. You're holding attendance. And somewhere inside it, folded where you can't see, there may be 28 years of somebody's patience, waiting for hands big enough. That's my story. 1 neon sticker, 1 oak bench with a secret, and 1 cassette tape that brought my husband home for 11 minutes. If it reminded you of something in your house that came from hands you remember, go put your hand on it tonight and ask somebody its story before the story's the only thing left. Do it today, not someday. And if a piano ever shows up at a yard sale near you for $40, look for the scorch mark first. Drop a comment and tell me about the thing you'd never sell. Hit subscribe so the next story finds you, and I'll see you next time.